Hello, everyone. We're here today to celebrate the incredible Anchal Seda and her debut book, What Would The Aunties Say? A Brown Girl's Guide to Being You. Anchal is, of course, a leading beauty influencer and YouTuber who's been working in the industry for nearly a decade. And the book is actually inspired by her podcast, What Would the Aunties Say?, which has had a lot of life advice for brown girls who are living in the West from the South Asian diaspora, as well as peppering it with her own experiences. And the podcast was featured in Spotify's Best Podcast of the Week playlist, rated 5 stars on Apple Music. I've no doubt that the book is going to go on to be just as significant. And What Would the Aunties Say takes us through every aspect of life. So, I mean, it really does cover everything from education to dating to career to beauty standards to mental health to racism to inequality. And of course, the most important thing, your own relationship with your family. So, Anchal, congratulations, firstly, writing a book.
Thank you so much.
And so without further ado, let's get started because there's a lot for us to cover.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone wants to know, like the first thing, I think people want to know is how did the book come about and why did you want to write it? So let's just, I think, kick off there maybe.
Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And okay, so the book came about, obviously, we had the podcast and I loved doing that, but I felt like there was only so much that I could do and talk about. Podcast episodes can only go on for so long. Nobody wants to sit there for hours and hours on end on a certain topic. And even when I did Brown Girl Problem YouTube videos and Brown Girl Confessions YouTube videos, again, they were kind of very quick and short. It was very punchy. I'd read out someone's problem or confession and give an instant sort of reaction. And again, that can only go on for so long. Those videos are only 15 minutes. And some of the things that people are sending in or the things that we're talking about are so heavy. They come with such weight. And there's just so much to unpack with all of these different topics. I felt like a podcast or a video just wasn't doing it enough justice. And I felt like writing a book would just be the best thing to do because you can really sit down and really think about what you want to say and get everything off your chest. And I mean, this is my first book. I have not written a book before. So it was quite an experience because I was able to really get everything off my chest, and it just felt so different to doing a podcast or a video. So yeah, the book came about because I just felt like, first of all, we don't have a book like this in the South Asian space. Yes, there are amazing South Asian authors and South Asian books, but there isn't anything like this. This is almost like a sit-down chat with your mate. So I just felt like it was really, really important to have something like this.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, because I know that we're going to get into it in a bit more detail, but it was so brave in terms of tackling just aunties as a topic, because it's one of those things where we all know about how our lives have been affected by aunties in our extended families or family friends or whatever, but it's something that we tend to talk amongst ourselves about, even though it's actually such a hugely formative part of how we develop into adults, right? Absolutely. So I'd love to get into that very shortly, and just because you're right, there isn't a book that covers it as a topic. From like a logistics point of view, in terms of the book, was it something that you were doing the podcast and you decided that you wanted to turn it into a book, or was it something that a publisher decided to approach you with? Because I think a lot of people are interested in how you bridge, when you have like an online presence and a lot of your content is out there, and then how do you actually move to a completely different medium like a book?
Yeah. So I have my beauty management, and on my very, very first meeting with them, so in this industry, when you have managers and whatnot, there's a lot of people that can promise you the world. Oh, I'll get you this, I'll get you working with that person, blah, blah, blah. And I'd been through a bit of that. And I met this new management who I'm currently with and love. And on my very first meeting with them, I told them about my podcast idea. And I didn't think of the book at that point. And they instantly were like, Anchal, this could be a book. And I was like, me write a book? Okay. I was like, okay, like one step at a time, guys. Like, let's do the podcast first. But as I was doing the podcast, and basically when I was planning the podcast, I had like these color-coded sheets on my laptop. And when I went to the production team for the podcast, I gave like a full presentation of all the topics, the things I want to talk about, like the questions that I'm going to ask. And I don't think they even wanted to know that much, but I was like going in, I'd written all of this stuff on all of the different topics. And then it was from there that I'm like, I've got all of this information written down. I've done like half the work. I know exactly what needs to go into now a book. And we then pitched to, I created a pitch for the book. I then had a manager for the book. She sent it out to a bunch of publishers, and then I had to pitch it, and it was all a really cool and very different experience, so different to anything I've done before. I feel like the publishing space is so different to the beauty space, but it was nice because it was a huge learning curve, and I was just learning along the way. I created a video pitch as well as a written piece as well, because I just thought, one thing I know how to do is sit in front of a camera and talk. So I'm going to sit in front of a camera and talk. And I'd done like the first page of 5 chapters as examples within my pitch. So I took those chapters and I basically not performed them, but I did them on camera, and I set up a green screen, which I'd never done before. And I taught myself how to do that. And in the dating chapter, I talk about sitting in the back seat of your boyfriend's car. So in the video, I had myself in the back seat of a car as I spoke about that bit, or as I spoke about being in a hotel room, the background would change to being in a hotel room. So I just thought I wanted to bring something different, and I wanted to bring my personality to the publishing world. And I don't know if they'd seen a pitch like that before, but that's how the sort of transition happened. That's a really long-winded answer, sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, because as you were speaking, one of the things that just occurred to me actually is that it's so interesting that you have done a book that is about identity and about things that are really important to you and how you formed as a person, versus what would have been the most obvious choice of a book, let's say doing a book on South Asian beauty, right?
Yeah.
So I'm quite interested to know as to why it was, because this also must have been quite cathartic, I think, like to writing about all of this stuff as well. Because with writing, you're absolutely right. You do get to go a bit deeper into topics in a way that you can't really, when it comes to video. So why was it that you decided to do something that was more about identity and who you were as a person versus like the obvious choice?
Just because I've always felt like that side of things means so much more to me. And I want to make a difference with people, and I want to help people. One thing I love doing is giving advice. I don't know if it's good or bad. People seem to send me their problems still, but I love helping people, and I love pushing people to do better and be better. And there are so many things that get in the way of that, like the aunties, like family, like, caring about what other people think, and all of that, all these pressures. So I wanted to, and these are all things that I've gone through myself, but couldn't express through my YouTube channel, through beauty. There's only so much I could do. And I felt like this just meant so much more. And if I felt alone in these situations, there are so many other brown girls that also could be feeling the same way. And I'd rather go down that route.
Yeah. Which brings us very nicely onto talking about the actual topic of the book. So the book is called What Would the Aunties Say? And in one of the reviews of your book, a really positive review was that this sort of relief that it was being covered as a topic, but also there was a very interesting phrase, and I was like, oh, I've never thought about it about like that before, which was the toxicity of auntie culture, because there can be good things, but there is a toxicity around it. So I thought that would just be a great place to kick off and just ask, so what was it about this particular, your relationship with this particular aspect of our culture, that made you really want to kind of focus in on that, and what has it kind of meant to you?
Well, it's because I come from a really large family, really large on both sides. My mum is the youngest of 8. Then my dad just has lots of brothers and sisters and cousins, and everyone is really close and really involved with each other, and everyone's in touch with each other as well. So everyone can see what everyone's doing. And my dad especially is someone that cares a lot about what other people think, and he cares a lot about his siblings and his relatives, and he wants, I think this is like everyone in the Asian sort of culture, image is really important, and showing that you are always good, happy, doing the best and all of that. And I'm kind of like a more real person. If I'm having a bad day, or if something's not right, I'm okay to talk about it, I'm okay to show it. But it's quite, I live in a home where my dad is like one way and I'm the complete opposite, and it's really conflicting and it's really challenging. And I think growing up, I've found that really, really hard, and that's why I kind of wanted to talk about this, because it's stopped me from doing certain things, or it's really bothered me in certain situations. Going on holiday with your girlfriends and wearing a bikini by the pool, which is where you're meant to wear your bikini, and someone having something to say about it. It's like, yeah. It's not on. So yeah, I really wanted to focus on these sorts of normal everyday problems that we have and we go through.
Yeah. So for anyone who might be watching this who hasn't read the book yet, what is your definition? Like, how would you define what auntie culture is, and how has it impacted your life? I know that that's a big question.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we can get into more detail later on.
Auntie culture, I would say there are elements definitely of it being toxic, but I also like to try and understand why it's that way, and where this toxicity is coming from, because they've probably had it 10 times harder. What I struggle to understand is why they then pass it on if they've had to go through all of the hardships themselves. But yeah, I would say that it's a high pressure sort of environment, and space. I feel like that's auntie culture. It's a bit, yeah. Did I answer that correctly?
Well, it's more like if someone's watching this and they're so for example, I would say that our aunties are people who aren't necessarily your blood relatives. Like, they kind of, you define it as being, women who might be part of your community or your family.
Yeah.
Feel, for example, they shape a lot of how you are when you're younger through either comments or unofficial policing of your behavior, basically. And one of the things you just kind of touched upon, which is about like all of the stuff that they've gone through, is that actually I think that there is a lot of unresolved, like, intergenerational trauma that basically gets passed down through that. And I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
No, absolutely. I feel like it's unresolved issues. It's things that they've had to kind of suppress, and they've not been able to talk about things. They can't share their thoughts and their feelings, and just in general, just being women. They've had to sort of fit a certain mold in that generation, and they've had it hard in that way. So I understand, and yeah, there's just a lot of judgment. They must have had 10 times more judgment than we have. We have got it slightly easier than them. But yeah, they've had it bad.
So you cover a lot in the book around community and judgment. And writing a book about community and judgment is one of the things is that you're writing about something that is about a community who will then have something to say about the thing that you're writing about. What has been the reaction? What's been the reaction? And also, you mentioned your dad, in terms of him caring about what other people think and so on. So, what has been sort of the feedback around, or even writing a book like this?
One thing that I get called is brave. Brave seems to be the word for me. And I'm like, is it brave? I don't know. I just feel like it's something I should be doing. And as for my dad, there are definitely parts that he doesn't agree with. But I just say, if you don't agree, it means I'm doing something right, or I've said something right if you don't agree with it, because I don't want you to agree with it. I don't want you to agree with what I'm saying, because I want you to open your mind up and see the new way of thinking, and grow. So I don't want to think in the old ways, and I don't, not necessarily all the time. But yeah, I'm called brave, apparently.
How did you because I'm really interested, because basically when I did my first book, I kind of just like dropped it off at my parents' house and then left really quickly. So how did your family see the first? Did they see the finished product, or did they see something beforehand?
They only saw the finished product. And I said, when I was writing it, I said, you're not allowed to read it, to my mom and dad. I was like, you cannot read it. And if you do, I'll tell you what bits you can read and what you can't. I mean, I have a chapter on sex, for God's sake. So
yeah,
no. And but when the samples came in, he just stole one, literally, and he sat there on the sofa that evening. He did not move, and he just ran up. I was in my room. He ran upstairs halfway through, and he was like, oh my God, Anchal, this book is brilliant. Oh, this is the best book I've ever read. And I was thinking, you haven't got that far into it yet, mate, have you? And I was like, okay. Then the next day when he'd finished it, that's when he was like, there are bits that I don't agree with, but it was a very good book. I was like, okay. But yeah, no, I actually don't mind that they've read it now, and I just think it's much better out in the open.
How did you decide? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, on the topic of sex or whatever it is, but how did you decide because it's a very fine line to tread, right, in terms of like, how do you produce something that is out of the box and that is not something that people have seen before? Because personally, I think that that's why historically there aren't that many South Asian books that talk about like lots of different topics, such as dating and sex and whatnot, because we are worried about the reactions from our family members, because God forbid they should ever know that stuff happens. But how did you decide, whatever the topic was, whether it's like and I would love to ask you a bit more about mental health, because that was such a beautiful part of it. How did you decide like what to keep in and what to kind of save and keep for yourself, and how to toe that line between producing something that's authentic and real, that will resonate and connect with people, but also being able to, protect yourself, and also, you do have your family to think about in this kind of stuff?
I think what I wanted to do was think about your real life journey, and take you through each step of the way. We talk about careers and colorism, and then like dating, sex, marriage, gender inequality. So it takes you through like life as a brown girl, even through to a woman. And I felt like it was really, really important not to miss out on these important moments. So it was a bit for me. But at the same time, what was more important for me was the fact that it was an important topic to discuss. And it would be wrong for me to miss out on some of the things. I just feel like when I was writing it, I was just like, oh, okay. But I just was trying to think of the bigger picture and how much it would help someone. And just, we don't see this kind of stuff in books. We don't get to talk about it as South Asians. We don't get to relate to it. And the whole point of this is so that someone can read it and relate to even just one part. And if that's the bit that they can relate to and they can feel seen, then I'm doing my bit. And yeah, that was the more important thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of advice in the book, and you also, through your podcast, you would have had people emailing or DMing and sending letters to you asking for advice. What is the most common area that you get asked for advice around, or some of the most common areas?
Yeah, so there's a couple, probably interracial relationships, and general like dating or marriage pressure, like, oh, I'm this age, I feel like my family's pressuring me to get married, or there's my partner is Muslim, I'm Hindu, we can't get married, or there's caste issues. So it's not even necessarily about race. Sometimes it's just interfaith and caste and all the other little segments to it. So it's just trying to give people the strength and help to get through that moment. But those that I find are the most common.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think that it's something, is the thing that people are struggling with? Because also, I loved that you touch upon, the double lives, basically, that the most of us have led at some point. And I think what tends to be the case is that it's not just something that happens when you're a teenager, where it's usual for a lot of people to maybe have, different lives that their parents don't know about and so on. But it's something that, I mean, I know people who are in their late 30s and 40s who are still leading two very different lives from what their families think they are. Have you noticed, when people are asking for this kind of advice, like, are there any kind of patterns in terms of how do you advise them around that? Like, do you say it's something they should talk to their families about? Like, how, because to me, when I look at that as a situation, I don't know how things are progressing, but obviously you have your ear much closer to the ground. So do you think families are evolving and changing, or is it still very much the same problem?
I feel like the problems are still the same. It just, what it is now is that we do have a little bit more strength, and a bit more fight in us than before, and we can do these things now, and we can see all the other options, and we want to go with what's right. Really, I feel like our generation can see right from wrong. And our generation also wants to make sense of things, and half the time what our families are saying don't make sense. It's like they can't give us a real reason why we shouldn't do a certain thing. It's just it's based on emotion. There's no actual reasoning behind it. But half the time people just give me like a snippet of what they're going through, so it's hard for me to fully give them full advice because I don't know the full story. I don't know what their families are like. So you never want to say anything that's going to get them in a worse situation. What you can do is give them strength to actually have the conversations, because I think it's so important that they still step forward and do the right things for them, no matter what is going on. Essentially, I always just want the best for that person that is struggling.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's such an important thing to remember when giving advice, which is, what is going to help that person in their situation versus what it is that you would do. And so being able to get that person to kind of like look at the situation and to have an honest conversation. I mean, I think that is already light years from where, our parents' generations and how they weren't even really given a choice. So that is very encouraging to hear. I mean, would you say that you tend to get asked this stuff by more women? than men, or does it tend to be something that both sides, like, is there also a latent sexism in terms of, you know, just what expectations are for women versus men?
I definitely get asked a lot more by women. I feel like, I don't know, I don't know if men face the problems as harsh, and I'm not saying that they don't come across these problems, because I feel like even if a guy was to read my book, they'd be able to relate to a lot of the issues. But I just find that their problem doesn't go on for as long as probably a brown woman or a brown girl's does. You know, being disowned, I feel, it is so much worse and so much bigger on a brown girl. I don't know why. I just feel like they're more accepting of young guys and young men, and they can make problems. And I mean, I hear it all the time in my own family, like, oh, it's okay, so he's a boy, or oh, boys do this thing. So yeah, it's definitely, I feel like there's a lot more girls and young women, and well, at least that's who's messaging me most of the time as well.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess the expectations are different for us. And I suppose that's where I think the South Asian community is going through a really slightly awkward growing phase, where it's just you know, actually I don't really think that women are I mean, I feel like more and more women are calling out that disparity between, well, okay, actually, sorry, why is the expectation still that I should be a competent cook and be able to do this and be able to do that? And why am I the vehicle for like honor and shame, and a boy or a man isn't? And I don't think that women are staying that quiet about it, personally.
No, and then that's another issue as well, the fact that we're not staying quiet as well, because girls shouldn't speak up at all.
Yeah. Well, one of the topics that I was so glad that you covered, because it's so needed, and I just feel like it's still so taboo, was around mental health and therapy. And I'm going to ask you about that, but it would be great if you could just, for context, to just explain what that chapter was about, and what you describe in that, and why it was important for you to talk about having had therapy.
I've had a bit of a unsettled childhood, and things weren't plain sailing, and I found it really, really challenging to sort of accept my culture and all these rules, and all these rules that come from my dad, who I love deeply, but I have quite a challenging relationship with. So that sort of drove me to get therapy, which I have to say was one of the most life-changing things I've done. And it's still something, when I'm not having therapy at the moment, but all the time I'm like, I need therapy again. I feel like it should just be an ongoing thing. Constant therapy, please. But yeah, it's more the childhood issues that I've had, and then growing up. And then sort of when you're a kid, you don't really take everything in. You don't really notice everything, and you're going so fast paced, and you're just moving from one thing to the next. It's only when you grow up and sort of reflect and take a step back, and you can actually see what's going on, and you start to feel a bit different, which is why I started therapy. And I was so nervous to even go online or on my videos and talk about the things that were bothering me the most, because it was just in my head. All I wanted to do was talk about all these issues, and I couldn't. And yeah, it just gave me so much more confidence to do so. And I feel like therapy is such an amazing tool, no matter what you're going through. Even if you're having a good day, I think it's so amazing to do.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? When you talk to people about having therapy, and I don't know if you spoke to your family about it, but they instantly get really concerned, because they think that, oh my God, something's wrong, and you know, it's, oh, are you okay? And And actually what you're doing is once you start therapy, I mean, a lot of people will end up in therapy because they have reached a crisis point or whatever. And a lot of people still, because in especially in the UK, I don't think we have quite the same relationship with it that we do in the US.
Yeah.
But when you then start it, you realize that actually what this does is really at its most fundamental level is A, help you to understand yourself, and B, help you to have better relationships with your friends and family.
Absolutely.
In a way that you just can't get there on your own. And I don't know that the people who haven't had therapy quite understand that.
Yeah.
What did your family think of you having therapy?
So my mum and my sister had therapy also.
Okay.
So they were a lot more open to it, and it was my sister that was encouraging me because she could just see it was what I needed. And yeah, for my dad though, he's still got that mindset where it's like there is something wrong with you if you need therapy, or what, like, why would you need therapy? You can handle things on your own, sort of thing. So yeah, it was something that I didn't really share with him, and it was only if I got really upset and wanted to lash out, I would say, oh, I'm going to therapy. But I would almost just then explode and say it. But yeah, I wasn't actually able to, and even then I couldn't say why I was going to therapy. So it was quite challenging explaining it to someone that doesn't quite get it and see how much it can help you.
Yeah. I mean, well, mental health is still pretty taboo, I think, I think things are getting better in the South Asian community, but it's still something that is really tough, I think, for people to understand. I think that we're not quite there yet with the mainstream conversation.
No.
I don't know if you found that.
No. And also, even in terms of just how they refer to things, like they don't use the correct terminology towards people sometimes with people that have mental health problems. And there are so many different types of mental health problems. And half the time, yeah, you just hear they've got like their own phrases, or they say certain old school words that just shouldn't be said anymore. I won't say them, but they're still very backwards like that, where they're not very sensitive towards other people, I think. So yeah, we still have a lot of work to do in that department.
Another department that I think we've got a lot of work to do. So
there are so many. Should I write a second book?
yeah, obviously you have to. There has to be a part 2. But with colourism, and I find that, like, I mean, as a topic, it's something I've always been interested in. And you work in beauty, which is it touches on that so hugely. In terms of, like, I just want to kind of take things back a little bit in terms of beauty standards, as someone growing up who is South Asian, and it's that sort of catch-22 where you're growing up, you don't really see that many representations of your own beauty or even your own skin color in the mainstream, whether that's TV or magazines or whatever. And then at the same time, you've got this whole conversation and narrative that's perpetuated by our own community around beauty standards, of which colorism is such a huge, aspect of it, not to mention how you look when you go to a wedding or a family function. And so what was that like for you when you were growing up, in terms of your own kind of concept or idea of beauty and how it related to yourself, and then just really taking that bull by the horns and actually turning it into a profession?
Well, like most, growing up, I thought that fair is more beautiful. And when I did start wearing makeup, I was wearing a foundation that was 2 shades lighter than my skin tone, which now when I look back at pictures just looks absolutely ridiculous. But that was the thing. I mean, we're in even like Punjabi music, they have lyrics that talk about like fairer skin, and it's just, that there was Fair and Lovely growing up and all of that. And even you just hear relatives say, oh, to someone, oh, she's so beautiful because she's so fair skin. Like, that's the thing that they would pick out. So these things instantly stay in your mind. And also my brother, when he was born, he was and he always has been slightly darker than the rest of us. And from the minute that he was born, we've had family and all these relatives say that he needs scrubbing and he needs to drink milk and all of that. So hearing that from literally being a baby, you would think that, okay, that is bad, and being fairer is good. And it's such an issue. And then we have all these myths about going in the sun, not going in the swimming pool, not going here, not doing that. And it's just been a huge part of our life. But I think it's all part of growing up and self-acceptance. I think it is where you just think, well, actually, rather than fighting what I am and what I look like, I'd rather just accept it, because life is so much easier. And I won't look so ridiculous if I wear my own foundation shade. And yeah, like I feel like when I was working at Mac, I really noticed it then, because I would have other clients come in and they would want to be fairer as well. And that's sort of when it hit me as well, that I was like, oh my God, it sounds ridiculous when you have to hear someone else say that, oh no, I want to be lighter. I just think, wow, like I must sound like an idiot, like when other makeup artists have dealt with me. And yeah, I think as you grow and you just start to accept yourself, and it's so much better. It's so much better when you realize that how you are is amazing and you can't change it either.
Yeah. I mean, something you said just reminded me actually of when you were talking about when babies are born, it's just such an incredible time, and it's just such a special thing to happen. And that is one of the first things that is commented on, when they're literally like within the first like week of their life.
Yeah.
And there are other things that are said, which, are also then said when you're younger, which is basically all anchored to your marriage prospects. So, the color of your skin is anchored to your marriage prospects, as well as, what people consider to be beautiful, etc., etc. And that's something that you just hear from like a very, very young age.
And even success, even career, even in terms of career as well. Like you won't be successful if you're a certain skin tone as well. And so it just plays a massive part in every single aspect.
Yeah. I mean, what tends to be your advice for people that, when you're an adult and you're just carrying the weight of all of that, whether it's around how it affects your self-esteem and so on, like, do you tend to have advice for people around how you can almost reconcile or heal around that slightly?
I would say that this is how you were made. And how you were made is so unique. Everyone has got so many beautiful, different undertones. Like we may all be brown girls, but we're all different types of brown girls with different shades, different undertones. And isn't that beautiful? Isn't that the most amazing thing? So you'd rather just be you and be unique and accept that and learn to love it. Like, I would start playing with different eyeshadow colors that would make my skin tone pop, or a certain lipstick. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is beautiful. And I don't have to put fake tan on. I can just go in the sun and my skin glows. Like, it's beautiful. Why not just love that?
Do you have any advice for how, I mean, I know how I handle some of the aunties in my family, which isn't really a popular approach, but
same.
Do you have any advice for when you are an adult human being and you are in those situations, and someone's commenting on, I don't know, the fact that you're single or your skin color and so on, like what is a good way? Like, should you say something? Should you confront it in the moment?
Oh God, there are parts of me that will argue. Okay, there's like one side of me that is like, it depends what mood I'm in, because I'm ready to fight. And then there's the other part of me that I just sometimes think it's not worth it, and it all you can do is maybe in that moment calmly try and educate them, or just explain to them that's not very nice, or actually I don't feel like I need to speak about that. But I will say this is based on personal experience as well. Sometimes they can be really persistent, no matter how much you don't want to speak about something and how kind you're being. Sometimes I just think smile and nod, just agree and let them think what they want to think, because at the end of the day, like, they're going to go home and then you can carry on with your life.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
On sort of the topics of, well, it's not quite the same thing, but when it comes to, for example, leading double lives, and it being something that we never sometimes grow out of, because I've seen that happen to people where they never grow out of keeping their lives separate.
I've not grown out of it. I'm currently in that phase. I'm still leading this double life.
How can that be harmful sometimes in terms of, and in what sense do you think?
Oh God, with personal other relationships. So you've got these relationships that you have at home. You've got that, and I mean, I would say I am myself at home as much as I can be, but I can't share too much of myself at home. So then there are parts of me, there are parts of me that are a different person outside of my home. And it's the secret keeping for me. I'm not even a secretive person, as you can see from my book. I'm not even a secret person, but it's harmful because you go into other relationships, whether that's like, what am I trying to say? Like a love relationship? What?
Romantic,
that's the one. My God, a romantic relationship or even friendship sometimes. And you go into those, but because you've already formed these bad habits of keeping secrets, of having a separate life, you're able to like compartmentalize parts of your life. And then you end up doing that in those other relationships, which, especially in a romantic relationship, I don't think is healthy at all, and it can be really, really harmful. But you're already in those bad habits, so it's really, really hard to break away from. And for anyone that isn't South Asian, if you're dating someone that isn't South Asian, for them it's very challenging to try and understand you having these separate parts of you and separate lives. So yeah, it is definitely very harmful.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to even sort of university days of where especially like in interracial relationships that people I knew were in, and it was just a given that the person who wasn't Asian just had to accept that they would never ever ever meet their partner's family, and they just had to be okay with that.
And it's like, well, no, this is just what you have to do. But actually, if you think about it, it's so wrong and it's so unfair. And yeah, it's not right. Or even like when you have friends and you're like, when you come over, you can't say a guy's name. Like, don't talk about this, don't talk about that, don't swear, don't like, and it's not fun. Just don't come over.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess all of that comes down to a couple of things, which is really wanting your family's approval. Like, we're taught from a very early age that is the most important thing, and obviously the other part of it is not not shaming your family, not letting the side down, in front of other people. And so I think that can be such a massive inhibitor when people might want to be honest with their parents and to tell them, or at least like broach the subject very gently. Do you have any advice for how people can kind of navigate that? Because I know, obviously the huge caveat is that for some people it may not be safe. It just may not be safe for them to do that. But for others who are worried about it, and I've seen people just work themselves up into such a state, right, about like their approval and worried about being, their parents being upset and so on. What is the advice you have for how you can mentally prep yourself to have that conversation with your family about something that might be really important to you to be able to tell them?
I think it's important to take your time with it and first start off by just generally having discussions away, like with it not being about you, first of all. And maybe just, oh, I read this today and this came up, and and just have those small discussions and sort of see what they actually think and what they actually feel when it's not towards you. Because half the time what we do with our parents is we think this is what they're going to say, this is what they think, and we have these assumptions of how they actually think and feel. But sometimes it's actually the opposite. So before you jump into those conversations, just play the field a little bit, have the discussions based around a topic or something else, and then slowly broach it, maybe on a different day, give it some time, and speak about yourself and what's bothering you, or whatever it is that you want to talk about, and approach it that way, because that way you've got a bit of a clear idea of how they would react, what their thoughts are. And I think it's also important in those moments when you're having those discussions to educate them at the same time, and maybe try and change their perspective and always try and do things in a calm manner with love, and rather than force and fighting, because then nobody wants to listen. I think I'm someone that's like, I want you to think the way I think, and I want to change your mind right now. And that's not the best thing to do. I'm telling you from personal experience, it's not the way to go. It's best to take your time and allow people to give people and your parents food for thought. Let them think about it, let them sit on it, and sometimes they come round.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's so interesting. I think there's a couple of things there that I just want to ask you about. So personally, I feel that actually understanding your parents, so understanding the journey that they've been on and who they are as people, and not just your parents,
yes,
I think really helps with this kind of stuff, in terms of how you have the conversation. But there is like a hurdle to kind of overcome, which I would say every single South Asian person I know has this with their parents, which is, it doesn't matter what age you are, they treat you like a child.
They do.
So the choices that you make and the decisions that you make in your life are, it's not that they don't support you, it's that they question the validity of you making that decision as an adult, basically.
As an independent person, are you able to make the best decision for yourself? Because they want nothing but the best for you. But what they also don't realize sometimes is that we have to mess up sometimes to find the right path to make the best choices. You've got to go through some bad choices to get to the good ones. And I think they forget that sometimes.
I mean, how have you done this, or what is your advice for people that want their parents just to take them seriously and to actually listen to what they're saying? Like, has that been something that you've had to deal with, during the course of your life, presumably around when you change your career, right? I guess.
Yeah, I think the difference is just being sure of yourself and what you're saying and what you're doing. I'm lucky in the sense that I've got really supportive parents, and when I quit my day job and said I'm gonna do YouTube full time, and I don't know how much money I'm gonna make yet, but I'm gonna do it, I was very, very sure, and I was going to do it regardless. So yeah, I think when you go to your parents, you have to go to them with some confidence. Otherwise, how are they supposed to believe in what you're saying, or whatever decision it is that you've made for yourself? How are they going to have that strength and confidence as well? So you also, facts and figures, come prepared, come with the spreadsheet if you must, a PowerPoint presentation, everything, have everything planned, mapped out, because they are your parents, they love you, they want nothing but the best for you, and they just want to know. They don't know everything that's in your mind, and also where times are so different now to how they were before, they don't sometimes know how new things work, or how we move from job to job, or how we do a creative career, how do we make money from it being a creative. It's all new to them. So I think it's really, really important to, again, just inform them. It's really important, and give them that respect. Involve them sometimes too, because it's exciting for them.
Yeah, because I mean, it's, especially as a creative, they may not understand everything,
No.
but they will still, you know, they will still always support you. Like my mum, for example, is, I think, like the best unpaid PR that I have. Like she
My mum and dad as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things, but it's almost like you know, you have to have the, and I don't want to use the word brave again, but you have to have the bravery to have that conversation and to sit in that discomfort with them a little bit. And I don't know, I mean, would you say that that's true? Because I think that that sort of that preempting of their disapproval, we all do it. We all do it. But you have to be able to be brave enough to broach it, because otherwise you don't end up getting to that more honest place, right?
Exactly, you do. And like I said, you just have to be so sure in what you're saying and of your choice
Mm.
so that they can then back you just as much. I think it's really, really important how you deliver that information and how you approach them.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring it back to the book for a minute, and I just sort of wanted to ask you about the actual kind of process of writing it. So, one of the things that spoke to me from the book was that this is something that is going to give people a bit of courage, a bit of empowerment to challenge that status quo and to just make decisions that can be respectful, but also it's about living, you know, life that's true to who you are. Would you say that that was one of the intentions with the book, and when you sort of started writing it?
Absolutely. I just want someone to read it and feel inspired to maybe make their own choices, something as small, or even if that's big, something as small or big as that. And just feel confident enough to do so, and even just approach situations differently, or find confidence in themselves, and not feel like they constantly need to rely on the validation of other people, whether that's relatives, parents, or whatever. Just be you, enjoy being you, and don't let other people and all of these opinions and noise and pressure stop you from enjoying your life and yourself, because I feel like we can so easily lose ourselves in all of that, because we're so worried about what other people will think. But sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish, I would say, and put yourself first. And sometimes that does disappoint others. But if it's costing you your happiness, then I think, yeah, it's worth just doing your own thing, and making those choices for yourself.
Do you have any advice for anyone who might be grappling with that a little bit, in terms of like, how do you, so for example, let's say if you've got a big life choice to make, right, around whether it's like your career or telling your family about someone you're dating or whatever it is, um that seems like such a big thing, like a big task, and it can be very overwhelming. Do you have any advice for like how you break that down in terms of just starting to think about changes that you can make and so on? And it could either be something that's worked for you, or it could be something that you've advised someone else.
I would say the best thing to do is probably to plan.
Mm.
Planning is key, to map out whatever it is, if whether it's a career change or it's someone that you're dating. You need to think about the future. You can't have these discussions and fight your family over nothing. You need to know, you need to know and believe in whatever it is that you're doing, and sort of have a vision in whatever it is. And I think that's the only way that you can then go and have these conversations, because you're then able to provide more information. You can prove them wrong almost as well. But I also, at the same time, I don't want people fighting families and whatnot. I want everything done respectfully and with love. But yeah, it's just important to be able to share your thoughts, your opinion, be able to express yourself. Like, you should always be able to express yourself and know what's right from wrong. And at the end of the day, you have to go with your own choices, and you have to go with what is right for you, no matter what anyone thinks.
Yeah. Well, that is very good advice. I think that could apply to any situation. I wanted to also just ask you about, so there is a part of your life or parts of your life that are in this book, and you also have, a massive presence online as well. How do you manage your own kind of, I hate the phrase work-life balance, but there's no other substitute phrase for that. But how do you manage, let's say, your life, your public life, and your life online and your life offline? So how much of you do we see online versus the you offline?
You see a lot of my personality online. What I give online is me.
Yeah.
But I keep a lot of my life offline. Like anything I don't want my parents to know is not going online. They follow me on Instagram, for God's sake. So they know, like, oh, if I'm out, why didn't you post on stories? Because I don't want you to see what I'm really doing. That double life thing is coming again. But yeah, no, I feel like you do need to keep some things for yourself. I think it's really, really important to have your own personal life and your own personal moments. But whatever I do share online are probably the most meaningful things, and the most exciting things. But who I share is completely me. I'm literally the same on and offline.
Yeah. And speaking of sort of sharing online, one of the things in the book that I was so impressed about was talking about cosmetic surgery, because we just don't really, I just don't think we really talk about it in sort of the South Asian community at all. And I think I said this to you before. I was in shock that South Asians even like had cosmetic surgery until like 2 years ago. And then afterwards I just thought, of course they do.
Why not?
And I know you sort of mentioned talking about your experience with it, and then your dad sort of having a conversation with you about it. But why was it so important for you to share that part of your life in the book and online?
Yeah, well, I just felt like there wasn't anyone doing it. Again, it felt like such a taboo. When I was trying to do research for ethnic noses, I couldn't find any ethnic noses. And then I'm like, I know all of these Bollywood stars have had all this work, but like, I'm not seeing anything. Yeah. And it was quite frustrating that there wasn't anyone with an Asian nose. And I had the surgeon saying, well, because you're Asian, you have thick skin, you have thicker skin, so your healing could be different and your healing time can be different. So I was just like, well, I don't know what that's going to look like on a South Asian nose with thicker skin. Like, that's really scary. And yeah, my dad was worried, like, oh, just don't tell anyone, what are people going to say, and all of that kind of stuff. And I just thought, no, the whole point is, if I can't find it, someone else can't find it, and that's a problem. And I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. Like, again, it felt like shameful if I'm getting surgery, but really it's not shameful. I'm doing something to help myself almost, and I don't see any shame in it. And I think it's, yeah, there's even less shame with sharing it. I'm so happy and open about speaking on this topic. And I'm so glad I did, because so many South Asian young women have messaged me following that, saying, I haven't seen anything like this before. And oh my God, I've wanted to get my nose done, or I've wanted to do this and do this. And I didn't know it was a thing. So it's helped someone. So I'm glad. But yeah, it is such a taboo still. And it's strange because it's something that is actually very common.
I think it's almost that thing of people worry that if you talk about it, it will encourage other people to get it done. And it's like, well, some people get it done and some people don't. And wouldn't you rather that there were resources available for people
Right,
Get it done.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, which is also what I loved about, like, the topics that you cover in your book. Whereas some people, might just sort of wonder whether we should be talking about this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but we're already talking about this stuff. It's just that we had these conversations verbally versus it actually being in a book that you can kind of like hand to someone as a guide or a help.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. So I have a question about, like, do you have plans? I know we joked about it for a part two, but do you have any plans going forward, or what as a last question, what is in the pipeline?
Do you know what? If I'm honest with you, I am soaking up every single moment of my debut book. I would love to do a second book. I don't know what on yet. I don't know if I would do the same theme, but I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah, write a second book. If there's another lockdown, maybe I could do it again. But no, I don't know yet. But I am really enjoying this moment because it's so amazing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, enjoy all of the hard work that you've put into this, and yeah, everyone should buy this. It's out now.
Yeah.
So, and thank you just for sharing so much of yourself, and for, I think, helping empower other people to do the same and make the right choices for them. So thank you, Anchal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, I've loved doing this.